everybody, Gina Mizell here alongside Danny Moran. We are at Reser Stadium where Oregon State just beat Arizona 42-17 on Saturday night to snap a 5-game losing streak, and I think the most convincing, thorough victory of the Gary Anderson era. You could maybe throw the Idaho State game in there, but this was against a Pac-12 opponent, never trailed, dominated the game for the most part. Just what were your initial thoughts about tonight?
Yeah, that was my initial question to Gary Anderson. Was this the most thorough win since he's taken over as coach? And his answer was yeah. I mean,
most complete performance. Yeah.
Right. I mean, the Idaho State game, you're right, they won that. They were never really in the possibility of losing it, but they kind of, I think, were a little flat offensively. This time, 5 of the first 6 drives were touchdowns. Marcus McMarion, 16 for 19, 5 touchdowns, which is that's more than he had the whole season, if I'm not mistaken. I think
more touchdowns than incompletions.
Right. It's unbelievable. Ryan Nall came back in a big game, 124 yards rushing, and the defense, Arizona has really struggled. This is a winless team in the Pac-12, so it was a game, as you wrote this week, that Oregon State was favored to win for the first time all year, but they did what they were supposed to do. They were thorough on both sides of the ball, and without Seth Collins, who obviously is still in the hospital in good condition, recovering from an illness, but to have this kind of performance is pretty much as encouraging a sign as you can have going into the Civil War.
Yeah, well, you mentioned Seth Collins, and of course other guys had to step up in his place. Again, it seems sort of silly to talk about him in football terms, but Jordan Villeman, a breakout performance. He struggled all season and had a big 53-yard touchdown and ended up with a great performance. Trayvon Bradford had his first career touchdown. Guys like Timmy Hernandez and really the offense as a whole. Ryan Nall was kind of the stalwart, and coming back from that foot injury, he was as good as you would expect him to be, but it was more a story of Marcus McMarion and the other guys that sort of stepped up in Collins' absence.
Yeah, it was a situation where in practice Kevin McGivern said in the UCLA game that it was the best McMarion had been with his read progression.
Yeah.
But he got pressured so much in that game and never really had time to throw. It was hard for that to really show up.
Right.
This was a time where the offensive line protected McMarion. He did have time to throw, and it was his most effective game by far, the most effective game for that matter by any Oregon State quarterback, probably in 2 years.
Yeah, well, they said the last time that an Oregon State quarterback had 5 touchdowns was in 2013. Sean Mannion did it against Colorado, so it's been quite a while.
And they had Brandon Cooks on that team.
That is true. That is, he was pretty good the last time that I checked.
He continues to be,
Yeah, and defensively, of course, Oregon State holds Arizona to 10 points. Anu Solomon started the game, but Brandon Dawkins came in, and he was able to get some things going running the football, but really Oregon State's defense locked down, and Manasseh Hungalu, the linebacker, credited the offense for staying on the field as far as helping them get some rest, kind of to reset their minds, and it seemed to be, again, both sides of the football kind of all playing off each other, and they put together a really solid performance.
Yeah, the defense has never said allowed anything that they've been frustrated, but they've turned in some pretty good performances this year, and particularly last week, really putting the offense in position for all of their scores. So to come out on the losing end week after week, it has to be frustrating. So to see the offense finally break out, you could tell, just like you said, from the defense, just how encouraged. Xavier Crawford had his first career interception. So a lot of firsts tonight for a lot of young Oregon State players.
Yeah, Dwayne Williams came back in the secondary. He was playing nickel, got his first podium game, as we say. He came into the post-game press conference, and that really kind of solidified some things in the secondary. And yeah, Manasseh Hungalu followed up his performance against UCLA with those 3 takeaways. He had 10 tackles tonight, and just again a good effort overall. But of course now this snaps a 5-game losing streak for Oregon State. They've now got 2 Pac-12 victories after having 0 last season, and this sets up a pretty interesting Civil War with Oregon coming off a big upset win against Utah. So just what are your initial thoughts about that game?
Yeah, the good thing, obviously one thing we need to mention too is Victor Bolden.
Yes.
Was taken out of the game after he was, they called kick-catch interference.
Yeah, he was clocked pretty good on a punt return.
Right, he was back on the sideline after initially going to the locker room, so unclear. I think it was precautionary. So what I was going to say, the best thing for Oregon State is they remained pretty injury-free tonight, which I think they needed. Ryan Nall had a big game. So, yeah, I think the way for the offense to have this kind of game and have this kind of confidence against an Oregon defense that's struggled, that's key, because Oregon, despite all the struggles they've had this year, it's never been a question that they can still move the ball. So the defense is going to have their hands full. I think they're going to need a good offensive performance from guys like Nall. McMarion's going to have a good game. Seth Collins, we assume, is not going to be able to play, so other receivers are going to have to step up. So for their confidence, I think tonight was pretty big for that, guys. How do you assess it?
Yeah, no, I think all of that, and just again, this was a game that Oregon State was expected to win, and they had never really been in that position really in about 2 years. I mean, they were favored in that Colorado game last year, but I don't think any of us walked into that saying Oregon State's going to win that game. Right. So not only did they cover the spread, as Kevin McGiven alluded to, that he hoped that they would, thoroughly dominates a team that they should have beaten, and I don't know if we would have thought should have beaten handily, but that's what happened tonight. So I think that can only bode well for an interesting and intriguing Civil War matchup. I mean, it's not going to be big nationally given the way that both of these teams have performed this season, but certainly for the trajectory of both programs, I think it's a big game locally.
Well, these guys don't, they say they don't acknowledge point spreads, but I mean, we brought up last year, I forget the exact number, but I know Oregon opened as a 30-something point favorite last year, and these guys all remember that. I mean, even the guys who were new, the coaching staff who was new, they've all had their first experience in the Civil War, and that was a close game. So I think we'll see how much this week they say it publicly, but I know that streak has weighed on a lot of people in Corvallis, and I know the players, as new as they are, they're going to really want to get a win.
Yeah, none of them have beaten the Ducks.
Never.
Yeah. So, well, we're going to go write our stories. Now we sort of have to digest what just happened, but thanks for joining us on Facebook Live. Again, Oregon State beats Arizona 42-17. For Danny Moran, I'm Gina Mizell. We will catch you next time.